दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना ईमान में वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना ईमान में वक्त से एक रिश्ता Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of Friday Sermon for Kids. Today I am once again joined by two incredible panelists, Haris, Hassan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How are you two doing today?
Wa alaikum assalam, Farhan Bhai.
Wa alaikum assalam, Farhan Bhai. I'm very excited to start this week's episode.
Yeah, me too.
That is very good to hear. Now, in this week's Friday sermon, Huzoor continued to shed some light on the topic of the Battle of Uhud. Now, before we get into our discussion, let's listen to what Huzoor said in this week's Friday sermon.
बस आपकी रहमत जो अल्लाह ताला के रंग में कामिल तौर पर रंगी हुई थी, इस हालत में भी गालिब आई जबकि आप ज़ख्मी थे, खून बह रहा था, और आपने फिर ये दुआ की कि अल्लाह ताला का गज़ब भड़कता है जब लोग उसके नबी पर जुल्म करते हैं, उसके प्यारे पर जुल्म करते हैं। लेकिन ए अल्लाह, ये जुल्म जो कर रहे हैं ये लाइल्मी और बेवकूफ़ी की वजह से कर रहे हैं, इनको बख्श दे, इन पर इनकी गलतियों की वजह से अज़ाब नाज़िल न करना। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन व अला आलि मुहम्मदिन। क्या शफ़क़त और रहमत का मुज़ाहिरा है।
Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, has been talking about the Battle of Uhud in his Friday sermons for some weeks, which shows how important the Battle of Uhud is in the history of Islam. As such, I want to know what both of you learned from this week's Friday sermon.
I learned that the angel Jibreel and Mikael helped to fight in the Battle of Uhud.
I learned that the level of forgiveness of the Holy Prophet ﷺ was extremely high.
Oh, very good points. Now, I also want to know what all of you from across the globe have learned from this week's Friday sermon. So for that, let's head into our next segment, Kids Take.
Assalamu alaikum. In the Friday sermon, Huzoor Anwar said in the Battle of Uhud that there were two men wearing white. They both were beside the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and they were referred to as angels Gabriel and Michael.
In today's Friday sermon, beloved Huzoor taught us that two angels came in the Battle of Uhud to help the Muslim army. Jazakallah.
Excellent job to all of you, and like always, we love to hear from all of you across the globe. So send us your videos and we can inshallah include you in our next episode. Now, let's get into this discussion. Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, in this week's Friday sermon mentioned some injuries that the Holy Prophet ﷺ incurred during the Battle of Uhud. Can both of you tell me what these injuries were?
Yeah, I remember Huzoor in his sermon last week mentioned that a rock was thrown at the Holy Prophet ﷺ. It was thrown in such a way that it broke one of his teeth.
Yeah, Huzoor Ayatollah Ta'ala bin Aziz also mentioned that the armor rings of the Holy Prophet ﷺ also ended up piercing his face.
Great job. Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, also mentioned that after the Battle of Uhud, the Holy Prophet ﷺ had great difficulty reaching the mountain pass, and this was because of fatigue and his injuries. Once this mountain pass was reached, Hazrat Abu Ubaidah bin al-Jarrah had to use his teeth to pull the armor rings out of the face of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Now, however, in this process, Hazrat Abu Ubaidah broke two of his teeth. And despite these efforts, the bleeding
of the Holy Prophet ﷺ's face would not stop. And so it wasn't until Hazrat Fatima Rizat Anha's arrival did that bleeding stop, when she used the ashes of burnt straw to treat the Holy Prophet ﷺ's face. Now, Huzoor may Allah be his helper mentioned a very important point about this specific incident, and that is that despite the bleeding of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, his forgiveness was immeasurable. During this entire incident, the Holy Prophet ﷺ implored to Allah Ta'ala to forgive the Quraysh for their ignorance.
I cannot believe that even though the Holy Prophet ﷺ was injured so badly, he still asked Allah to forgive the Quraysh.
Yeah, but doesn't Allah Ta'ala punish the people who hurt his prophets?
That is an excellent question. And Huzoor may Allah be his helper in his Friday sermon said that Allah Ta'ala does sometimes punish the people that harm his prophets. Now in this case, Allah Ta'ala revealed to the Holy Prophet ﷺ through a verse in the Holy Quran that the matter of punishment and forgiveness is with Allah alone, despite the Holy Prophet ﷺ continuously asking for forgiveness for the people of the Quraysh. And now it is time for the word of the sermon. And we actually have a brand new speaker to teach us about the word. And so, Samir, the floor is yours.
Jazakallah, guys. Today's word of the sermon is Bahaduri. The word Bahaduri is originally Urdu, and it can be described in English with just one easy word, and that is bravery. Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, used the word Bahaduri to describe some of the companions of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. These companions showed incredible bravery and courage during the Battle of Uhud. Hope that helps. Back over to you guys.
Well done, Samir. Now, in this week's Friday sermon, Huzoor also talked about how angels descended during the Battle of Uhud to help the Holy Prophet ﷺ and the companions during their fighting. Now, in some narrations, it is stated that the companions said that there were two unrecognizable men in white clothing that stood on either side of the Holy Prophet ﷺ and fought the enemy during the Battle of Uhud. Now, these two men were believed to be the angels Jibreel and Mikail. In another narration, it is stated that a companion of the Holy Prophet ﷺ during the Battle of Uhud said that there were some disbelievers around him that were killed not by himself but by a man that was unrecognizable. Now, it is true that whenever the Muslims fought in a battle, angels would descend, and this battle was no different. I want to ask both of you, do you remember what other battle Huzoor talked about in his Friday sermon where angels descended and helped the Muslims?
The Battle of Badr.
Great job! That is correct. Now, Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, in his Friday sermon also mentioned that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Rabi rahimahullah said that the angels that descended were wearing either black or red turbans.
Wow, that is so cool. I wonder what the angels looked like as people.
Yeah, the angels were fighting in the battle too, which is incredible.
And it's very interesting to know that, just like you said, Haris, the angels descended and helped the Muslims during the Battle of Uhud. Now with that, we are going to head into our next segment, which is Question of the Sermon. So, I hope you boys are ready. Now, I will give you both the question of the sermon and then 10 seconds to think about the answer. Now, here is your question. Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, mentioned that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Rabi rahimahullah said that when the angels descended to help the Muslims in the Battle of Uhud, they wore two colors of turbans. It was either black or red. Now, the red turban, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Rabi rahimahullah stated, symbolized something. Now, here are your options. Option A, the red color symbolized a great loss of the Muslims. B, the red color symbolized bravery. C, the red color symbolized peace. And D, the red color symbolized the fall of the Quraysh. Now, your 10 seconds begins now. Alright, time is up. What are both of your answers?
I think it's D, the fall of the Quraysh.
Me too.
Unfortunately, both of you got the answer wrong. The answer is actually option A. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimahullah said that the color red indicates a foreshadowing of a great loss that the Muslims would incur during the Battle of Uhud. Now, let's get back into this discussion. Now, in this week's Friday sermon, Huzoor Malabi's helper, just like in previous Friday sermons, mentioned a companion who showed a lot of bravery during the Battle of Uhud. Can one of you tell me who that companion was?
This week, Huzoor Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Aziz mentioned Hazrat Anas bin Nadr, Rizallah anhu.
That is correct. And the story that Huzoor Malabi's helper mentioned about Hazrat Anas bin Nadr Rizallah anhu is a very inspirational one, especially because the Battle of Uhud was such a difficult time and such a difficult battle for the Muslims in general. Now, Huzoor Malabi's helper mentioned that when the false news of the Holy Prophet ﷺ's demise spread throughout the Muslims, some Muslims were so disheartened that they stopped fighting and sat on one side of the battlefield. Hazrat Umar anhu was actually a part of these companions as well. Now when Hazrat Anas anhu saw this, he asked his companions, "What are you doing?" And these companions replied, "What is the purpose of this battle if the Holy Prophet ﷺ has passed away?" Hazrat Anas anhu replied by saying that this is the very time to go back into battle and to attain the martyrdom that the Holy Prophet ﷺ has experienced. He also mentioned, what is the purpose of life if the Holy Prophet ﷺ is not there? And so with this, Hazrat Anas anhu leaped back into battle, and that is where he gave his life. Huzoor Malabi's helper also mentions that in this valiant effort of Hazrat Anas anhu, Hazrat Anas actually experienced more than 80 wounds. And that is from different types of injuries, from swords and even arrows. And Huzoor Malabi's helper mentioned that Hazrat Anas anhu was so unrecognizable after the war that it wasn't until his sister came that she was able to recognize Hazrat Anas anhu from a mark on his fingertip.
Wow, that is so faith-inspiring. The way Hazrat Anas anhu was martyred showed how furiously and bravely he fought.
That is true. And in regards to this bravery, Allah Ta'ala actually revealed a Quranic verse that talked about Hazrat Anas anhu and other companions who showed similar bravery, just to commend them for what they did.
Did you enjoy this week's Friday Sermon for Kids? Want to know how you can make it even better? Tell us what you learned from beloved Huzoor's Friday Sermon and send your videos at FS4KIDS@mta.tv no later than every Sunday, and we'll try our best to include them in next week's episode.
Now, we can't include all the videos you guys sent to us. So, you guys can visit our Instagram and Twitter at MTA Canada and see all the videos you guys sent to us. Remember, at Friday Sermon for Kids, you're not just the audience, you make the show.
Now that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Let's give our audience a little recap of what we learned today.
Huzoor Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Aziz mentioned about the injuries caused to the Holy Prophet ﷺ. But despite all of this, the Holy Prophet ﷺ still asked Allah to forgive the Quraysh.
Huzoor talked about how angels descended up during the Battle of Uhud and fought on the behalf of the Muslims. It is recorded that they wore turbans and that they were not seen before or after the battle.
Well, excellent job to the both of you. Huzoor Malabi's helper also talked about the sheer bravery and fearlessness that Hazrat Anas anhu showed during the Battle of Uhud. And just like always, Huzoor Malabi's helper also made an appeal for prayers for the current state of the world. And with that, we have come to the end of this week's episode. Make sure that all of you sitting at home listen to the Friday sermon in your own time, and make sure to tune in to our next episode. Until next time, Khuda Hafiz.
مگر ہے شرط تم سے مسلسل رابطہ رکھنا مگر ہے شرط تم اس سے مسلسل رابطہ رکھنا امام وقت سے ایک رشتہ عشق و وفا رکھنا دلوں میں پیار کی خوشبو تو ہونٹوں پر دعا رکھنا امام وقت سے ایک رشتہ عشق و وفا رکھنا امام وقت سے ایک رشتہ عشق و وفا رکھنا